What makes a good villain? How should antagonists be written so that the audience will find them intriguing, compelling, and intimidating? What components of a bad guy's presentation will make the audience tremble in their seats? There are, of course, numerous answers to those questions. Obviously, not all villains are going to be formed from the same mold. Your antagonist is not required to have the indomitable strength and toughness of the Viltrumites, nor must he be as maniacally, gleefully destructive as Heath Ledger's Joker. Nor does he need to have the sheer weight of inevitability carried by death in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. All excellent villains who could hardly be more different, save for one crucial shared characteristic, which is, of course, well, I'll let the experts on fear and intimidation tell you.
It's all about presence!
The universe of Star Wars has no shortage of villains with fearsome and unique presences. Darth Vader is naturally the preeminent example. His mere appearance upon his introduction is enough to inspire fear, a feeling that only deepens when the viewer learns of his immense mystical power, all backed up by his calm, measured demeanor that serves as a facade for his anger and hatred, which you do not want to see unleashed. Darth Maul similarly poses an intimidating figure simply through his character design, and his ferocity in combat proves his looks to be entirely undeceiving. While I don't love that they yada-yada'd him back to life purely because it gives lightsabers as killing weapons just a lot less weight, he was truly a fearsome antagonist in the Clone Wars. Maul was ruthless, vicious, and had the power and skill to back up his confident bearing. His former master, of course, stands tall, all figuratively, as one of the most intimidating figures in Star Wars history. Palpatine's seeming omniscience during his unseen political manipulations made him a formidable and frightful opponent, even from the shadows. And then we get to the sequels, and find Kylo Ren imitating it, not quite aping the visage of Darth Vader, and it's gone. No, it's back. Are we supposed to be scared of this guy or attracted to him? I can't tell. Well, Snoke certainly appears to be quite the fearsome figure, looming larger than life over his subordinates. Oh, never mind, he's dead. And it was super easy, actually. Well, at least there's General Hux, giving that ferocious speech to his loyal legions, and he's falling victim to a 1990s cell phone joke. Well, maybe he can recover from that.
I'm the spy.
Never mind. But my intent here is not to crap on the sequels, nor even to praise the original trilogy or Clone Wars, but rather to examine a character who followed all of that, as we experience time anyway, if not in the timeline of Star Wars. So let's examine one of the best written villains from one of the best written shows of recent years. And in the process, we will, of course, discuss some rules on how to write a villain with an intimidating presence. More specifically, I will lay out guidelines on how to turn a seemingly normal, ordinary person into a truly terrifying antagonist. Before I can get to those, however, I'd like to ask you to consider supporting my channel by joining my Patreon, which gives you access to our Discord as well as behind-the-scenes content and the ability to vote in polls for future video ideas. Patreon.com/MasterSamwise, link in the description. If you want to learn more about it, stick around till after the essay ends, or if you want to just do something for free, you can go subscribe over at Lift, Die, Repeat, which is where I play video games and work out when I fail, so that's fun too. The subject of this discussion is, of course, Dedra Meero, who serves as the main antagonist in Andor. I suppose that's a bit of an oversimplification. After all, Cassian Andor never even sees Lieutenant Meero, and I think she, at most, catches a glimpse of him. The conflicts in Andor are as numerous as they are complex. But if you had to single out someone as the main bad guy from the show, I imagine you'd have to pick Dedra, despite the fact that she doesn't even show up until the 4th episode. Until that point, Deputy Inspector Cyril Karn had served as the central antagonist, as he was the one actively hunting Cassian. But we'll return more to his character later on. Dedra is very much Cyril's replacement, but when we are introduced to her, it is not in a grand or even remotely dramatic fashion. Quite literally, the first thing we see Lieutenant Meero do is simply walk to work. The following scene is a meeting, a daily, first thing in the morning, what are we up to today meeting. Aside from the fact that it is being conducted and attended by members of the Third Galactic Reich, it could be any meeting from any company anywhere in the world. Even Dedra Meero's first line of dialogue is entirely bland and corporate.
We're here to further security objectives by collecting intelligence, providing useful analysis.
As her supervisor notes, those words are straight from the ISB handbook. That is how you write exposition well. By exposition, I mean characters telling the audience about other characters or about the world in which they live. Dedra's line lets the audience know roughly who these people are and what they do. It doesn't go into extreme detail, which is good, as the audience should be allowed to fill in the blanks with their imaginations. And more importantly, it tells us something about her. If a character must exposit, and even the best stories that show not tell the best do include exposition, the expository dialogue should always build the character too. There must always be subtext buried underneath the obvious. Dedra, quoting from the ISB manual, tells us that she is an attentive and dedicated employee, that she is not afraid to speak up when others are hesitant to make their voices heard, that she is likely ambitious, and we might even infer that she is somewhat new here, that perhaps she hasn't heard the following monologue that the Major has doubtless given a dozen times over.
We are healthcare providers. We treat sickness. We identify symptoms.
Why Dedra is all those things is not yet clear, but for now that doesn't really matter. What does matter is that the writing in this show is adhering to rule number 1 for writing a normal yet intimidating villain. Make them relatable. While I'm sure that few of us have Dedra's passion for her work, that is likely because our day jobs tend to be the ones that we have to do rather than the ones we truly want to do. But we as humans tend to have a strong want to work at something worth doing. We long to be dedicated to a meaningful project of some nature, and we typically admire those who are diligent at their tasks. It's clear from the start that Dedra is, if nothing else, a good employee. Her naivete in that initial meeting is an indication that she is optimistic, even idealistic, and audiences, being made up of people after all, are inclined to like and relate to positive, agreeable people. After all, we all think ourselves to be quite agreeable. The other lovely little dash of relatability that Tony Gilroy sprinkled on Dedra's character was that he made her an underdog within the ISB. Again, we as humans are naturally and historically inclined to root for the little guy, from David all the way to Rudy. So if you can spin your villain to be as someone who has to fight against the odds or the system to achieve victory, you have yet another ingredient in the recipe for a relatable character. This is obviously a well-known trick, however. Pick a heroine, any heroine from the past 10 years or so in Hollywood, and the majority of them will likely be cast as underdogs, pushed down by one bully or another, whether personal or systemic, but whether or not they will succeed in generating sympathy for their intended character largely comes down to execution, to how clever the writing is and how believable the power struggle is. As a quick example on how not to do this, take Child Galadriel from the Rings of Power premiere. She is, for absolutely no apparent reason, being bullied by other elf children, which makes no sense at all given how Tolkien wrote elves. Her torment has no origin and no real destination. It does not highlight much of anything within her character other than giving her something more of a reason to look to Finrod for guidance, and by guidance I do mean vaguely mystical mumbo-jumbo that makes no sense whatsoever. All of these nasty elf children were just invented to drum up sympathy for the protagonist, but they failed to do so because we don't even know if we should side with them over Galadriel, because we have no clue who they are, what they want, or what she did to draw their ire. By contrast, we have Lieutenant Blevins, Dedra's chief rival within the Imperial Security Bureau. The conflict between these two is initiated by Dedra's request to obtain the report on the incident on Ferrix, which happened within Blevins' jurisdiction. He perceives this as her overreaching, attempting to expand her area of influence within the galaxy and thus her own importance within the Bureau.
You might want to steady the ladder before you start climbing.
His petty denial of her request is, unlike the bullying elf children, actually rooted in something. The scenes with Blevin that follow this one make it clear that he is someone who cares about checking boxes and looking good. Things will happen on time according to his schedule. He doesn't particularly care about accuracy or the little unimportant details like what actually happened and why. He just wants things done so he can tell his superior that things are done. People in power tend to want to stay in power, to hold on to whatever control and influence they have. In an obviously competitive environment such as the ISB, a jealous man such as Blevin isn't apt to tolerate someone treading on his hard-won turf. Someone who, he believes, wants what he wants: advancement, promotion, higher pay, and more influence within the ISB. But he is mistaken. Dedra doesn't really care about those things. She just wants to win. Which brings us to rule number 2. Make your villain care. Lieutenant Blevin would never really be an intimidating villain because he doesn't really care about the mission, about the main conflict in which our hero is entangled. Again, this is evident in the way he handles the Ferrix investigation, ordering the Morlana corporate security men to sign off on a report that they were not even allowed to read, and not letting them speak while he berates them. Lieutenant Meero, on the other hand, cares deeply about the goal of the ISB. Her thorough and unrelenting pursuit of information, of links between stolen Imperial goods that might prove organization and thus rebellion, tells us clearly that her motivation is not self-centered or small-minded. Why does this matter? For one, because it feeds back into rule number 1. Make the villain relatable. We, or at least our idealized selves, care most about something outside of ourselves, be that a cause, an idea, a country, or more likely other people. I might very well be a selfish jackass in reality, but I certainly don't think myself one most of the time. So naturally, I will relate to characters who are as effortlessly selfless as I am. Heroes, after all, are selfless by definition, and were Dedra not working for the Galactic Empire, hellbent on enforcing its iron grip over every planet in the galaxy, her selfless efforts might have a chance at being called heroic. Perhaps that would still be too strong of a word, because when it comes down to it, Dedra really is just doing her job, and doing it well. She might be out of place within the ISB due to her disregard for its well-established territorial maps that each supervisor jealously guards, but there can be no doubt of her effectiveness and her potential.
There's a high bar for your performance, Lieutenant. Potentially the foundation of a uniquely superior career.
So far as we have seen, Dedra is not malicious, sadistic, or particularly villainous in any way other than her place of employment. She is highly intelligent and perceptive, but otherwise is shockingly normal. Again, we are combining rules 1 and 2. Most people care about their jobs, or would like to have a job that they care about, or have some other pursuit outside themselves which they want to excel in. Most people hate petty office politics. Most people just want to be free to achieve their goals. For Dedra, like for us, to want all those things is entirely ordinary, and yet she is doing all of this under the umbrella of the Third Galactic Reich. At this point in our story, Dedra seems to be an example of the banality of evil. Someone who is merely doing her job, trying to maintain order and peace in the galaxy. Certainly good ends in and of themselves, not particularly knowing or thinking about the consequences of the means that her organization uses to bring about those ends. We do get some hints, however, that she is not quite so clueless of the pain and death inflicted by the Empire as one might be tempted to think.
You came to us from enforcement.
Yes, sir.
Now, I'm not exactly sure what the Enforcement Division is or does, but simply by taking the name of it at face value, we can assume that Dedra does in fact have some experience on the front lines, such as they are. She has certainly enforced the Empire's mandates personally, and has seen the cost that others have paid. It seems likely to me that she wasn't actually breaking down doors and tackling fugitives, but rather directing others to do so and overseeing their efforts. The other hint at her still hidden ruthlessness also comes from the mouth of Major Partagast.
On a positive note, I was impressed with your detention numbers from Sev Tok, far above the quota.
As Dedra comes from enforcement, it should be no surprise that the systems under her supervision are better than average at imposing the Empire's order on their citizens. Those two lines also give the audience an idea of Dedra's competency, which leads us to rule number 3 for writing a normal yet intimidating villain. Make them effective. Ideally, the second rule will lead us to the third, as those who are passionate about their mission tend to be the best at seeing it accomplished. This is partially why Snoke fell completely flat as an antagonist in the sequel trilogy. He was never really fleshed out to the level of Palpatine, not even close. And without clear direction on where to take his character, The Last Jedi was free to just make him a complete moron whose greatest contribution to the story was scheduling a Force Zoom call between Kylo and Rey. What did Snoke care about other than generally ruling? Palpatine's despotic ways were fleshed out during the original trilogy. They explored his manipulative philosophy, giving us insight into what it took to become the most powerful man in the galaxy. Or take another pure evil dictator like Firelord Ozai, who is often critiqued for being a simplistic villain, but he's not. Simple, sure, but not simplistic. We see his character fleshed out through multiple flashback scenes. We see that he cares about the superiority and thus the domination of the Fire Nation. And he is ruthlessly effective in pursuing that goal, to the point of usurping his own brother's birthright and banishing his son for being weak. Point being, big bad evil guys, also known as BBEGs, whose ultimate goal is world or galactic domination, do not need to be skeletons of characters, but Snoke was. I say all that because, unlike Snoke, we have an idea where Dedra comes from. We understand what she cares about, that she is tireless in pursuing that apparent good, as shown by her late-night document review with her assistant.
2 more files each.
And we understand that, ultimately, she is good at what she does, which is critical when it comes to making this otherwise rather mundane character into a truly intimidating one. In order to have a fearsome presence, those who witness said presence must fear what you might do. Incompetency never invokes fear. As I've pointed out in previous videos, the Empire as a whole has suffered from a rather inconsistent image over the course of its existence because its level of competency has fluctuated dramatically from story to story. Empire Strikes Back swiftly and brutally stamp out the rebel base on Hoth. Return of the Jedi lose to a bunch of teddy bears with sticks. Obi-Wan Kenobi leave one of its most important installations quite literally undefended, allowing the rebels to walk in and blow it up. Andor suffer one setback, which was only remotely possible once every 3 years, and which cost Cassian's team 3 of their members' lives, and the Empire clamps down with an unbridled ferocity, to a degree that, oddly, Dedra believes to be ill-advised.
We're playing straight into their hands. This is exactly what they want.
While the rest of the Empire, including the ISB, saw the Aldhani heist as a random punch that happened to give them a black eye, Dedra perceived it for what it really was. A probing blow, a setup, one designed to enable future and far deadlier strikes.
An announcement.
Lieutenant Meero's heightened sense, her intuition, her ability to read a given situation, and her aptitude to think outside the box are invaluable tools. She now works within a highly structured organization, but as mentioned earlier, comes from a division where instinct and rapid decision-making would have been more valuable. The thing is, though, those skills still are valuable within the bounds of the ISB, they just aren't as valued as other traits such as obedience, following procedure, and getting quarterly reports turned in ahead of schedule. As a result, Dedra has to bend the rules a bit to get what she wants, what she needs, in order to best serve the cause of justice and order within the Empire. And of course, her use of the Emergency Act initiated after Aldhani to obtain reports on the Ferrix incident and other crime data not within her jurisdiction does not go unnoticed by her chief rival within the ISB, who brings up Dedra's skirting of the rules at their next meeting.
I believe our sector protocols, as described in the ISB Code of Conduct, are being violated by...
Dedra stands her ground, defends her unsanctioned actions as necessary, and concludes by stating that she has hard, verifiable data linking theft of Imperial equipment and its acquisition by rebel groups, and that Blevins' accusations
Have more to do with self-preservation than any sense of urgency.
The disdain in Dedra's voice when she says those words is just perfect. She doesn't care about playing the game to advance her career. She just wants to win. She desires nothing more than to do her job, to establish order, to crush her enemies beneath her, and she will do whatever it takes to do so, no matter who she may piss off or what consequences may befall her. And she is prepared to face consequences for her improper data acquisition, as evidenced by the surprise on her face when, instead, her boss commends her efforts. But of course he does, because this is the Galactic Empire, and victory must be achieved at any cost. The value of a method is in its effectiveness. Those who prove themselves to be competent and successful will ultimately rise above those who play the game and avoid ruffling feathers.
Systems either change or die.
On the flip side, those who fail will naturally be shunted to the side, disposed of, forgotten, which brings us back to poor Mr. Cyril Karn, who returns to our story when he is called in for questioning by Dedra, after he repeatedly filed missing persons reports for a Cassian Andor. It's hard for me to state how much I enjoy the dynamic between these two. Dedra is currently on top of her world. She has vanquished her office rival. She has been given free rein to investigate as she sees fit, and even her expensive wish list has been approved by her ISB superiors. She can do no wrong. In the same room, we have Cyril, for whom nothing has gone right lately, who is living at home with his overbearing mother, who is working a job that probably could have been automated but for the Empire's needs to keep its citizens busy doing something. And all because he ran headlong into a situation for which he was ill-prepared, allowed his sergeant to take the lead rather than actually commanding himself, and then completely froze when the Bantha Poodoo hit the fan and his men were killed. But before things went sideways, we should remember that Cyril was in fact quite effective and competent himself, in much the same manner as Dedra. Like her, he defied directives from his superiors and pursued a lead, ultimately resulting in him solving the murder he'd been ordered to write off as a suitable accident. Like her, he's motivated not by advancement up the corporate ladder, but by a sense of duty and a desire to maintain peace and enforce justice. Like her, he sees this current conversation as an opportunity, the person in front of him as a way to potentially get what he wants. His attitude is scarily reflective of hers.
Can one ever be too aggressive in preserving order?
But Cyril, as it turns out, is of practically no use at all to Dedra, as the only concrete detail he can add to the report which he was previously not allowed to read is Luthen's wardrobe choice.
Gray cloak, gray, green.
Cyril refused to fully give up, however, which leads to him accosting Dedra as she walks into work and confessing that their brief interchange gave him hope and a feeling of purpose.
I realized that if nothing else, there was justice and beauty in the galaxy, and if it...
As I pointed out in a previous video, this infatuation of Cyril's is not with Dedra herself, but rather with what she has. He doesn't have a wildly hopeless crush on the ISB officer. He is entranced by her authority, her competence, her ability to lead and to enact the Emperor's justice. He doesn't love her, he wants to be her. Dedra, however, takes one look at the sad, sorry man in front of her and feels anything but pity. Of course she has no sympathy for Cyril. What use would that be? He is at best a distraction from her work and at worst a threat to her investigation due to his obsessive need to find Andor and redeem himself. She's not a therapist or a career counselor. She is an officer in the Imperial Security Bureau, and she has a job to do. That job, of course, was what she was just headed to when Cyril stopped her. She was assumedly heading to another day at the office, like any ordinary person, except for the fact that the day before, she was in an entirely different system, interrogating and torturing two different people who were associated with Cassian Andor. Yep, just a regular old Tuesday for Dedra Meero. I obviously couldn't cover this character, and especially her presence and intimidation factor, without talking about the scene where Dedra questions Bix Colleen.
You're in my net, Biggs.
We have been talking about Dedra's effectiveness for some time now, but here is where it comes into full view. What does it mean to be effective? For Lieutenant Meero, or for anyone who wants to become a villain, it simply means doing absolutely everything in order to achieve victory. That includes torturing detainees with the screams of dying children in order to convince them to cooperate. But that doesn't happen quite yet. Before the scene begins, Dedra is already playing mind games, acting as if she doesn't want Bix to have seen the near lifeless body of Salman Pak.
What are you doing? Get him out of here. Quickly.
But Dedra very much wanted Bix to see him. She made sure of it.
Would you like us to clear the room?
No. I want her to see him.
Why? Well, that would be to set up a line that we will get to in a bit. But as their conversation actually begins, I say conversation, but it's really just Dedra monologuing. We witness her absolute calm, collectness, and confidence, her presence. She doesn't ask Bix for anything. She simply states what Bix is going to give her.
You're going to tell me absolutely everything you know about the buyer.
She doesn't try to downplay the situation, to dress it up as just a friendly chat, but rather imposes on her prisoner just how serious this is, just how important Bix's past actions are to the Empire. Dedra believes passionately and deeply in the importance of her mission. She takes pride in her service to the Empire, so of course she doesn't minimize the criticality of this interrogation. To do so would be to make light of her own importance, which is not something that prideful people can easily do. Make no mistake, Dedra is exceedingly prideful, just not in the way that others at the ISB expected her to be. Her self-satisfaction comes not from rank, accolades, or promotions, but rather, as we have already noted, from winning, from the ability to conquer, from power. Without power, of course, Dedra would not be at all intimidating. The other characters and the audience need to know that she can and will make good on her threats, that there is weight behind her intimidating visage, that she truly is ruthless. That trait, the willingness and ability to carry out whatever despicable act it takes to get the job done with no more effort than filing a quarterly report, is absolutely essential when it comes to turning an ordinary person into a fearsome villain. Dedra looms over Bix, telling her just how much she already knows, giving off an aura of omniscience and inevitability.
The very worst thing you can do right now is bore me.
She is telling Bix, I control your fate. Whether you live or die is up to my whims. Amuse me or suffer. Up until this point in the story, the viewer might have been able to view Dedra sympathetically, with a certain amount of detachment. As we've discussed, if you are able to conveniently forget her place of employment, Lieutenant Meero is a rather likable and relatable character. But then this scene hits, and you see her in her true element, going head-to-head with an enemy fully off the leash. Even without the torture device, this scene would do wonders for deepening Dedra's character, but with it, well, I'll let her tell you.
We have Dr. Gorst, who's developed a unique interview system some of us are very excited about.
We witness or hear about 3 implementations of these methods, which are, as mentioned earlier, forcing the detainees to listen to the screams of dying children. And in each case, the ISB has the utmost confidence in the extracted answers. Does Dedra have any moral qualms about using those methods? Does she hesitate to employ them at all? Don't be ridiculous. If anything, torture is her default. If the only reliable way to learn everything a target knows is via Dr. Gorst and his headset of emotional distress, then why bother with anything else? The name of the game is effectiveness and efficiency for the sake of the Empire.
I don't like wasting time.
Which is why she let Bix see Salman Pack getting carried away, and why she warns that
It's repeat listenings that cause the most damage.
remember that near corpse we just dragged out of here? That will be you if you waste my time. Dedra says it so matter-of-factly, as if it is a normal run-of-the-mill procedure that she's gone through a dozen times, which, for all we know, she has. And that is what makes her so terrifying. The ability and willingness to put another human being through severe pain, be it physical or emotional, in order to achieve your desired ends is the height of villainy. To see that apex reached by a person who the audience could relate to, whose enthusiasm and diligence could, in a vacuum, even be admired, is to realize that there exists within each one of us the capacity to do great evil. That ultimately is why this character and this theme are worth covering. Can any of us be absolutely certain that if born into these same life circumstances, we wouldn't become a Dedra or a Cyril? I value loyalty, order, and justice. I can't stand petty office politics and care more about simply doing a good job. I hate wasting time, and I do not like to be bored. The prospect really is terrifying, and therein lies the value of examining these stories in depth. If I do not want to turn into Dedra Meero, and believe me, I do not, perhaps I should examine my own life and ask myself, when and where do I use people, even in small ways, as a means to my desired end? However, we are not done with Dedra quite yet. While that scene with Bix was certainly the defining moment for her character in the first season, there is still one important plot point to cover, and one rule which accompanies it. Rule number 4. Make them vulnerable. After all, we are talking about a normal person, and ordinary people have weaknesses and flaws that can be exploited, that can cause them to fail. So far, we haven't seen Dedra fail in any meaningful way. Suffer a setback or two due to Levin's stubbornness, sure, but those have been nothing more than mild inconveniences. Up until the finale of Andor's first season, Dedra Meero has established and maintained control over situation after situation, both within and outside of the ISB. She has been superbly talented at upholding order. She is, however, but one woman. And when chaos breaks out on Ferrix during Marvel's funeral, Dedra is powerless to defuse the situation. Caught in the middle of the tumult, she panics, loses her blaster, and seems to be about to lose her life, and then is rescued by the man who himself had previously failed to properly control a situation on this very same planet. I believe they call that poetic justice.
It's called a cruel irony, like my dependence on you.
Throughout her story, Dedra's character has been slowly unveiled to the audience. At first, she seemed merely a competent and dedicated public servant. As we watched her work, we came to understand the depth of her motivation and enthusiasm for her work, which she believes is of no small importance. And then finally, we witnessed her full mask-off moment as she, without so much as a moment's hesitation, ordered the torment of multiple people in order to squeeze every last drop of relevant information out of them. We saw what can happen to a person, an utterly ordinary and normal person, when they give themselves fully to a cause, to an idea that is not ultimately rooted in the good of each and every individual person. As the smartest man alive puts it,
there are few things so dangerous in a man as lack of doubt.
The result is a truly terrifying character, one whose poise, control, effectiveness, and ruthlessness combine to create an intimidating presence that makes us forget that Dedra really is just one person, a human being, and thus is inherently weak and vulnerable. Like our heroes must be brought down to earth in order to make them more relatable, the audience also needs to see that the apparently unbeatable and omniscient villains can in fact be humbled. Because evil, in whatever form it takes, is not true. It is a corruption, a perversion, a mangled and maligned version of virtue and goodness. Ultimately, Dedra is afraid. This is important. Underneath her stoic demeanor, she is terrified. In that, she is an embodiment of the empire she serves.
Oppression is the mask of fear.
She seeks to maintain order because she fears chaos. The Empire metes out unjust punishments because it fears that any spark of resistance could set the galaxy ablaze. The more power one gains, the more tightly one holds onto it, and the more one is terrified of losing it. When order and control are the highest goods being sought, domination and subjugation will naturally follow, because they are, in the collective mind of the Third Galactic Reich, the only effective ways to ensure those goods will not perish. You've heard me call the Empire the Third Galactic Reich a couple times now in this video, and it's worth mentioning that I do not use that term flippantly. I know people like to throw around the word fascist today like it's candy, but, well, if everyone's fascist,
no one will be.
The actual political term, however, does fit the Galactic Empire. I mean, George Lucas named their foot soldiers stormtroopers. Come on. But yeah, they are a fanatically militaristic, expansionist group serving a despotic leader who believe in the supremacy of their own race, or rather, species. I say all of that not because I want the comment section to turn into a cesspit of debates over political terminology, but rather because the most notable fascist government in history was also deeply afraid. You don't round up over 10 million people because they looked at you funny. You do it because you are terrified of what they will do if you don't. Even in a democratic nation, such atrocities are possible. The US placed tens of thousands of Japanese Americans in their own concentration camps during that same period in history. Point being, fear leads us to do terrible things, which is why it is so crucial that when crafting a seemingly normal yet deeply despicable character, you give him or her something to be afraid of. That will almost always be the loss of the power which they have gained. But such a fear can manifest itself in many, many ways. Dedra succumbing to the chaos on Ferrix, making the same mistake made by a man she obviously looked down on, is but one of an infinite number of ways. So where does the character go from here? Honestly, I have no idea. I'm sure Cyril will try to leverage his rescue of her to get back into Imperial good graces, but I do wonder what the bloody disaster on Ferrix will mean for Dedra. As we noted earlier, failures are not exactly treated kindly by the ISB, but I do hope this show keeps her around in some fashion. I'm sure they will, because she's an excellent character. My best guess is that she will be the main antagonist again, her hunt for Andor and Luthen intensified and her hatred for them increasing as the second season goes on. If you're watching this after the second season ended and I was right about all that, tell yourself, I told you so from me. If I'm wrong, well, you can let me know what an idiot I am in the comments. Who knows, maybe Tony Gilroy and team will give her a redemption arc. I don't really see that happening, given her character so far, but if there's a writer's room that could pull it off, it's this one. I'm also curious to see where Cyril Karn's character ends up. I did a video devoted to him way back when. Check it out. Regardless of where she goes, though, I have thoroughly enjoyed Dedra's villainous journey so far. I loved that I could relate to her, that she cared about her work, that she was competent, effective, and even ruthless. And that, in the end, we learned that she was just as scared and weak as the people she tortured. This is why Andor is a good story and a great Star Wars story, because it shows us that in matters great and small, galactic and personal, dark will always give way to light. Evil will be vanquished by good, because good is true and evil is not. The stories that really matter will, time and time again, find their way back to that timeless truth. So, thank you for watching all the way to the end of the video. If I've kept your attention this long, I hope it's because you liked the video and liked the video. And if you're not already a member, as the lovely people on the screen are, please consider supporting the work we do here by joining my Patreon. Benefits include the ones already mentioned, as well as, at different tiers, a weekly unscripted video about whatever is on my mind that week, a bi-weekly written essay that is currently going through the Lord of the Rings chapter by chapter. I have also introduced the Hero tier, where you can have your own writing or video critiqued and analyzed by yours truly. And finally, if you have a story you really want me to cover and you are willing to sponsor that video financially, there is the Paragon tier, where you choose a game, movie, or show, or a specific character or a theme within it, and I will make a video essay about that. Honestly, no idea if this is something people will actually care enough about to pay for, but in case someone does, well, you have the option. Again, thank you for watching. Thank you especially to my lovely patrons. God bless, and I will see you in the next one.